Good afternoon. My name is Daniel McCarthy. I'm a communications student at WestCon, and this semester I was tasked with creating an experiment to provide insight into a major phenomenon of communication. The phenomenon that I chose to investigate for my project was the landscape of online consumer reviews and how consumer reviews shape the perspective of those who read them. This is a very interesting topic and one that's deeply rooted in communication. Also, it's one that's very close to home as it pertains to the advent of the internet and the way things are going for us as a society. As we move towards a world of more digitized communication, it seems imperative to greater our understanding of these types of phenomenon. Yelp is one of the biggest websites that use consumer reviews, and they focus specifically on restaurants. Restaurants are one product that can be sold from the couch, from your living room, from your TV. Restaurants have ways of advertising that have come and gone, and it seems that the internet and consumer reviews and word of mouth, electronic word of mouth in this case, are the biggest factors for restaurant success nowadays. In our present society, people are very attached to their smartphones. They're constantly checking to see if they have new text messages. Any sort of notification can come in from any app at any time, and these notifications can dictate how a person might operate during their day. In a situation where a restaurant is trying to maximize its profits, they also want to maximize their interaction with the client. Because, as I just said, with smartphones and people listening to applications that they have, being very invested in sharing experiences through social media, the connection to smart devices, the internet, and restaurant profitability is all interwoven in this world of electronic word of mouth. And I kind of wanted to crack into that and look into it for myself to see, as a restaurant connoisseur, what really plays into the language, what plays into how consumers who read other people's recounts of their own experiences, how they basically use that as a trustworthy source of information when they don't really know that person. So it's interesting to be getting unique experiences from people that we don't even know, told in the form of a story online. And aside from marketing campaigns and commercials that we might see while we're watching TV, these are the main things that drive the decisions of where we choose to eat. I like to go to the city a lot, and I like to eat out. I have friends that live in the city, and I'm just a train away, so I'm sure a lot of people that attend WestCon are in the same boat. This is something that is a phenomenon that takes place every single day, millions of times a day, and the results that yielded from the experiment were quite interesting, and I hope that it is interesting for you too, and it sheds some light on some of the things that are going on nowadays with like restaurant turnover and customer service and things of that nature. So without further ado, I decided when I took on this topic that the best way to approach it would be in the form of a textual analysis. So the textual analysis that I performed, it covered 100 reviews from the top, or not the top 10, but from 10 restaurants in the greater Danbury and Westchester area that I chose. And some of the restaurants were restaurants I had been to before, and some of them I had never even heard of. And all of the restaurants, and I found this very interesting, and one of the first things I noticed right away was that all of the restaurants except one had an interactive managerial response tactic involved in their feed on Yelp. So the Yelp profile listings, as I perused them, really told a lot about different methods and levels of engagement that different owners had. Um, when I devised the textual analysis, the main things that I was looking for were patterns in language. Um, I was looking for apologies and um, correspondence between owners and customers. Um, Now, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into when I started reading, because a lot of the things that I was looking for, in terms of the language patterns and things like that, they were very common, but they didn't really give me much insight into how customers were finding them trustworthy or not. The only indicator on Yelp that tells you whether or not a customer found a certain um, review useful is by a useful button. There's a like button for if you think it's a cool review, and then there's also something that says this was useful, and it's vote up or down. So I started weighing, as I started going into the textual analysis, I started to weigh those reviews that were voted useful 4 or more times as really the reviews that I was focusing on, and those specific reviews offered a lot of similar content, and the patterns that were showing in those reviews that were voted useful were they were not long-winded, they were sharing about the experience and not about the food was good or food tasted delicious. Like those, a lot of like exclamation points and like people like saying like bland sentences and posting them in like all caps, like those were not found useful. The ones that were voted useful were the ones where people could relate to the experience, the ones that told a short story. And this is something that really kind of shook the whole way that I was approaching this, because it related so directly to a concept of communication that I had learned about when I was doing com theory, and that was Walter Fisher's paradigm of communication. Or I'm sorry, Walter Fisher's narrative paradigm theory of communication. And Walter Fisher's theory, the narrative paradigm, basically suggests, opposite of rhetorical theory, which was developed by Plato and Aristotle and the Greeks, which is rooted in logic. Walter Fisher suggests the opposite, that human beings believe in storytelling. They share their experiences through storytelling, and that is how we decide as humans what creates meaningful experience and what does not, and what is trustworthy and what isn't. It's one of the first language skills that we develop as a human being, is the ability to understand an event being told in the form of a story, and to recount events as well. A lot of times we see little kids will start to form sentences together and tell ridiculous stories that don't really make any sense, but it's their way of gaining that ability. And human beings engage in this all the time online, and it really has an effect on how restaurants do business-wise, the type of revenue they receive, because restaurants are all about turnover ratio, how many times you can get butts and seats out of them, and the more traffic that you have on Yelp implies the more interest in your product, or in this case the restaurant, the food that you're selling, or the experience more realistically. And so the language and the apologies, these were things that, like I said, came up very, very regularly. And then in the useful reviews specifically, they were often voted more useful when they were responded to by the manager. Now, this is where the experiment really took a turn. I was not expecting there to be this sort of elitist group at the top that was kind of isolated from everything else. And when I found out about Yes, or the Yelp Elite Supergroup, they decided to institute a group of individuals who are considered Yes members, and they are Yelp Elite Squad to get special treatment at restaurants. That the restaurant owners know that their status, and when they share reviews, they seem to get the most likes, the most voted useful. When you go through Yelp, you can either sort by the date of the review, the most recent, or you can do Yelp sort. And I looked into it a little bit, and Yelp sort is this basically Yelp. It's really messed up, but how Yelp interacts financially with the restaurant more or less informs the way that Yelp sorts the reviews on that restaurant's profile listing. So if the restaurant pays Yelp, then they can, well, all restaurants pay Yelp to be on their service and to have a listing. But if the restaurant pays a little bit more, they can have Yelp arrange certain reviews so that they populate first when you go to look at that restaurant's profile. So with Yelp kind of cornering a little bit of a market here on electronic word of mouth, it's actually really, really interesting to see like how things can play out in the restaurant world with these companies that are trying to sell the best experience that they possibly can, and they're not even sure if the good experiences that they are providing are the ones that other people are seeing when they try to decide whether or not they're going to eat at this restaurant. And it's really not fair if Yelp is doing it in a way where it's like, if you pay us more, then we'll make you look better. Although that's kind of how advertising works, I suppose. I guess for the intents and purposes of the experiment, really what happened was I came into this looking for, a clear and concise formula of what constitutes a trustworthy review, what makes it so that reviews are understood by people and used in a positive way to inform their decision making. And what I ended up finding was that it's not about how the review affects the person reading the review. It's about how the reviews and the climate of the reviews and the way the reviews are presented as a whole affect restaurants, affect the people running the business, affect the food service industry as a whole, especially with Yelp, because it's such a large and well-renowned source for these types of digitized communications. The blatant favoritism is a dichotomy that Yelp has created with the Yelp Elite Squad, that has basically split Yelp down the middle as far as clients who feel like they're heard and clients who feel like they're not. And Yelp is not a service paid for by the client, it's a service paid for by the restaurant. Therefore, Yelp doesn't care. What you choose to get out of Yelp is what you choose to get out of it, and that's it. The restaurant, on the other hand, is the area of focus for communication, for devising strategies, and that's what my entire paper was about. Coming up with strategies that work. And I examined tons of research from the past about different forms of communication between restaurants and their customers in different countries, and specifically in the US, but they all focused on apologies, incentive-based apologies, and things that make the customer feel like they're welcome back, even if they didn't have a good experience the first time. The implications of the study are that the website profiles that these restaurants have are setting them up to either fail or succeed. And it's just the way that the restaurants decide to implement strategies of communication with their customer and how often they decide to engage and how well they engage that is going to determine how their product is viewed online, and that is going to be the greatest telltale sign of their profitability and their ultimate success. Thank you.